Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to rock and roll. As you may know, American popular music has had a profound impact on its British counterpart. But having lived in the US now for a while, it's become clear that British music has had a profound impact here. Barely a day goes by without an American professing their love for the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Queen. I could go on, I won't. And perhaps they'll be interested to know that a select few albums by their favoured British artists saw their titles change from point A to point B. And so without further ado, here are 5 British rock and roll albums whose names were changed for an American audience. You might know Peter Gabriel from his big selling hit and slightly terrifying music video, Sledgehammer. But as the former lead singer of Genesis, the English singer had made waves in both the UK and US long before then. After leaving the band in 1975, he embarked on a successful solo career that saw 3 albums launched in 3 years. The first of these was called Peter Gabriel, easy to remember. The second, also Peter Gabriel, and the third, Peter Gabriel. There's a man who clearly wanted you to know that his name wasn't Phil Collins. And so when the time came for the release of his 4th album in 1982, music lovers on both sides of the pond were probably going, "Oh, I wonder what he's going to call this one." And that question was answered in the UK when it was released, once again, as Peter Gabriel. Look, we get it, Peter, you're not in Genesis anymore. But in the US and Canada, where I can only assume it's illegal to produce more than 3 albums under the same title, it was altered. Much to Gabriel's chagrin and for reasons that aren't entirely clear, it was renamed Security. By early 1964, the Beatles had taken America by storm and the so-called British invasion was underway. So when an emerging English rock band by the name of the Rolling Stones launched their debut album, it charted as high as 11 in the US album charts. You have to wonder whether this was helped by the album's name change. In Britain, it was simply titled The Rolling Stones, but presumably in an effort to say, "Hey American market, you know how you're really digging the Beatles, who are also English? Well then say hello to the Rolling Stones, England's newest hitmakers." I'm not joking, that was literally the name of the album. The Rolling Stones, England's newest hitmakers. As was fairly common, the album's track listing got a slight revamp for the US version with the addition of Buddy Holly and Bo Diddley covers, presumably to also say, "Hey look, these British bands dig American music too, so they must be good." The Electric Light Orchestra, a 70s English rock band who, while undoubtedly breaking the US market, still bears the distinction of having had more Hot 100 Top 40 hits without scoring a #1 single than any band in US chart history. That said, things got off to a rocky start. In 1971, the band, fronted by the sole inspiration for my lockdown aesthetic, Jeff Lynne, launched their debut album in the UK under the eponymous title The Electric Light Orchestra. Nothing surprising about that. After all, bands who refused to do this would be soundly executed by the Queen. Freddie Mercury was so terrified he named his band and first album after her. Anyway, while everything I just said was entirely made up, the reason for the US name change is not, but definitely sounds like it should be. Ahead of the album's 1972 release in the US, a rep from United Artists called the band to find out the album's name. And when Lynn and the gang didn't answer, the rep jotted down, "No answer." A UA executive read this as the album name and actually released it that way. Unfortunately, the band also had no answer as to why it bombed in the US. When you think of rebellious British rock band, who comes to mind first? That wasn't a question, it was a statement. The Who comes to mind first. And there are a couple of reasons for this. First, guitarist Pete Townsend famously loved to smash the out of his instrument at the end of a set. But also The Who, as English as fish and chips, didn't name their debut album The Who. Somehow the band avoided execution, but is it any coincidence that Townsend and Roger Daltrey have never been knighted? Actually, now that I think about it, that is a sort of mock execution. Anyway, instead, the 1965 album was launched in the UK under the name My Generation to complement the song and hit single of the same name. But this wasn't good enough for the United States, presumably because the Queen was on speaking terms with the President, or something unlike that. Released a few months later under the title The Who Sings My Generation, the album would reach unexpected territory in the US album charts by not actually charting. While their first album's reputation would later be reappraised, it was the band's second album that saw them enter the US album charts, that album being this. Keen to follow up My Generation with an immediate second album, The Who launched a quick one in the UK in 1966. With an album running time of just 31 minutes, the title was big on its facts. But in an era when innuendo reigned supreme in Britain, see The Benny Hill Show and the Carry On franchise, the title was actually an allusion to infidelity, something the band expanded upon in the title track, A Quick One While He's Away. At that time in the United States, such a title probably wasn't going to fly. English rock and roll was already under the moral microscope following reaction to John Lennon's remarks on Jesus. And innuendo wasn't, and in my experience still isn't, the comedic tool in America that it is in Britain. And so the US version was renamed for a song not included on the UK version, Happy Jack. Performing a bit better than My Generation, it peaked in the US album charts at number 26. Let me know in the comments below if you own any of these albums and which of these name changes surprised you the most. Thank you for watching another Vlogmas episode. If you have not subscribed to this channel, make sure you do so at the end of this video so that you don't miss another Vlogmas entry on the lead up to Christmas. An enormous thank you to all of my patrons who make these videos possible. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Until tomorrow's video, good night